Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to my review of the Hamilton that nobody talks about. Hamilton are a fantastic brand. They have got this magic combination of an American past and a Swiss present that gives them huge global appeal. They've also got an amazing back catalogue to plunder. They supplied watches to the US military. Elvis wore a Hamilton, for goodness sakes, and they know how to promote their watches as well. Hamiltons have appeared, or should that be, have been placed in hundreds, literally hundreds of Hollywood movies. If you take Christopher Nolan's Interstellar as a recent example, it featured two Hamilton watches prominently, one of which was only a prop. But the demand from fans was so high that Hamilton released the watch and it has since become a bestseller. But there is one Hamilton launched in 2020 that has almost entirely disappeared from our collective conscience. And that's a shame because it is one of the most significant watches in the history of horology. Now, you don't hear me say that word all that often, but today it's justified. And today I'm going to show you that watch because I just bought that watch. But before I get into the box, I need to say thank you to Vincent from Wamada Jewelers in Sydney. Vincent is a well-known enabler and he has enabled my purchase of this Hamilton. You couldn't buy Hamilton in Australia until very recently, but Vincent now stocks the entire range and he loves to do a deal. I'll leave a link and a discount code in the description of the video. If you add an item to your cart, the discount will appear. It's not an affiliate code, there's nothing for me, just a discount for you. Thanks again, Vincent. Alright, let's flip the camera and get into the box. Alright, no clues from this standard Hamilton black box then, either as to what the watch is or why it hasn't really captured the imagination. Perhaps the price tag will help us with the latter question. 1275 Aussie. Mind you, if you saw the price of the Murph in the intro there, that was 1500 Aussie, they're not cheap. I leave the hand tag here today because I'm fairly confident that you can have a look at that reference number and still not have a clue about what's in the box. So, what's in the box then? Let's have a look. Perhaps you guessed it from the thumbnail, perhaps you guessed it from that silhouette. It is the Hamilton PSR. Coming into its fourth year of release then now, the PSR in 2024, but it just hasn't captured the imagination of us global wisses like I think it should, and I'll tell you why I think it should. This is the Hamilton Pulsar P1. When it debuted back in 1970, it was the world's first digital watch. It was the world's first watch that did not have analog hands to tell the time, relying on digital LED numerals instead. And it released in 18 karat solid gold because it was the 1970s for a retail price of $2,000 US. That is the equivalent of $13,000 US today. This is the Hamilton Pulsar P2 that the brand launched a couple of years later in 1973 in stainless steel for the much more reasonable cost of $395 US. Now, that was still more expensive than the cost of a Rolex Submariner at the time. This was cutting edge technology back in the 70s, and as such, this watch was desired by the trendsetters, the fashionistas, and those on the cutting edge. And did I mention that the Hamilton Pulsar P2 was also a Bond watch? Here it is on Roger Moore's wrist in 1973's Live and Let Die. The opening scenes have him wearing the Pulsar and very deliberately showing the time. And he made sure to press the button twice so everybody watching the film could see the Hamilton Pulsar's trick. There's actually a scene later in the film where Q hands him his Rolex Submariner, meaning two different Bond watches feature in the same scene in the same film. That doesn't happen very often. And here is a side-by-side of the Hamilton Pulsar P2 and the Hamilton PSR. They are, to all intents and purposes, identical apart from the branding. And the reason the branding is different is because Hamilton lost the rights to the Pulsar name at some time over their history. It's now owned by the Seiko Group, but PSR is as close as they could come to Pulsar, and there is even a little nod to that original name on the caseback, as I'll show you in just a second. So perhaps you noticed already, sometimes you can see those red LEDs, sometimes you can't. That very much depends on my studio lights here. It's a little bit artificial. I would say kind of like that is where the kind of resting state is here. Obviously this one is battery powered and having those LEDs glowing all the time is not good for the battery consumption. However, if you actually want to tell the time, you press the button on the side and there we are. They pop up in bright red just like they did back in 1973. Alright, let's talk about the features then. Well, you press the button on the side once and the time comes up. You press the button on the side twice, and the seconds come up. And that, my friends, is it. It doesn't do anything else. So what I'm basically saying is that this one retains all the functionality of the original watch from 1973, i.e. it tells the time, and that's it. It is a one-trick pony, and it very much depends on whether you like the trick or not. Personally, I think it looks fantastic, and yeah, it's got no more or less utility than a three-hand no-date watch, really. Hours, minutes, seconds, that is precisely it. Let's talk dimensions. Now, quite often when I'm reviewing a watch with a kind of square or unusual case shape, I'll say, don't worry about the small diameter dimension, it wears bigger. I'm not going to say that today, I'm going to say the opposite today. This one I measure at 40.2 mil across its widest point. I reckon it wears like a 38mm circular watch, though that's how it kind of looks and feels on my wrist, as you'll see in a minute. Now, in terms of lug to lug, have a look at the first link of the bracelet. It's not actually the first link of the bracelet, it's just designed to look that way. It is part of the case. Now, from the tip there to the tip there is still just around 40mm. If you want the first end link, the kind of male link there, it's 44mm. So, you know, take your pick somewhere in between those. 13.2 mil thick though. Lug width is not applicable because the bracelet is fully integrated. For what it's worth, it flares out. The first proper articulated link is 23 mil. It tapers all the way down to 15.5 mil at the butterfly clasp. That is sapphire crystal. It does have 100 meters of water resistance, and sized up for me and my 7-inch wrist, it weighs in at 129 grams. Case finish is all brushed, and it is quite a nice fine brush. You can see that piece of sapphire jutting out above though. Gotta watch yourself there, that one could possibly catch on edges, etc., giving a nasty chip, in which case it's heading back to Hamilton for a repair. The bracelet is actually okay. The finish isn't quite the same as is on the rest of the watch, but 3 links, pin and collar system, but all circular, all nicely curved and nicely comfortable on wrist. No half links though, but 129 grams with an effective diameter, equivalent diameter of 38. I'd be inclined to wear this one loose. That's how I have been wearing it. Nice Hamilton etching there though on that butterfly clasp, though it is in a vintage Hamilton font matching the Hamilton etching on the dial. Now that used to say Pulsar on the originals, it says Hamilton on this one. I don't think that's overdone. I think that's perfectly acceptable. That is a screw-on stainless steel case back, helping the watch gain 100 meters of water resistance with the usual spec sheet etched around its outer edge, and a picture of a pulsar in the middle. Pulsars, electromagnetic pulsating neutron stars, had been discovered in the late 1960s, and there was a parallel drawn at the time between the pulsar and the red LED digital display. Nice nod by Hamilton there. They can't use the brand name anymore, but they can put a picture of a pulsar on the case back. That's it on wrist. It's a good size, it's a good shape, it's a good weight, it's nice and comfortable. I like the retro taper on the bracelet. It looks pretty funky when you press the button and the red lights come on. Yeah, that's it. Moans and niggles. Well, like all of these LED watches, you need 2 hands to operate them. This one, you've got that kind of ghost screen most of the time, but really, if you want to see the time, particularly in sunlight, you're pressing that button. And talking of the button, it's not exactly a tactile delight, this one. You can press it. Well, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You really need to give it a good old push. You give it a kind of half push and you think it's working, but it isn't actually working. Yeah, you can depress it back and forth, nothing happens. You really need to give it a push to get the LED lights to work. And it's not cheap. I've looked at 3 other LED watches on the channel before this one, all significantly less expensive. The Gerlach Cosmonauta, an LED by Yema, and of course the Armatron Griffey, which comes in at around $50 or considerably less than that. Even looking around, the best price I could find this one in the States was for about $550. Hamilton does so many more mechanical watches for that price, and you can buy a smartwatch that will take you to the moon and back for far, far less than $550. This one is basic by comparison, but that is the point. This is true to the original. It's horologically significant, it comes from the first ever line of digital watches, and did I mention earlier it's a James Bond watch? All of those factors combined are the reason why I bought the PSR, and why I think it's a bit of a shame that it's the Hamilton nobody talks about. So there you have it, the Hamilton PSR. If you are into digital watches like what I am, there's a strong argument for picking up one of these if you can find one at the right price, that is. It may seem rather expensive for what it does, or should that be what it doesn't do, but when you consider its genuine horological significance, it might actually be a bit of a bargain. Well done for making it to the end of the video. If you like LED watches but not the price of the PSR, have a look at the Gerlach Cosmonauta or the $50 bargain that is the Armatron Griffey. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in the next one.